Today, we have Mike Pearson on the PitchBook podcast, Pitching Behave by Robert Sapolsky. Batter up. Mike, how are you?
Great. How are you doing?
Good. How is life? You're traveling all 50 states, or how many states you were telling us before we started recording? How many states have you been to in the United States?
Right now I'm trying to get to around half of them, and I think I'll probably do the other half later. I don't know when exactly, but yeah, it's been really fun seeing all the different places in the country. It's a huge country.
And you're in West Virginia right now?
Yeah, currently, yeah, West Virginia.
Okay. For those listening, I'll see videos of Mike where he is, I don't know, you have a GoPro, you're just blasting down some mountain side. It's kind of cool. I look forward to your posts, but you're usually on some different terrain.
Yeah, it's cool the variety of terrain I get to uh, mountain bike on. That's my favorite thing. So yeah, I'm actually using the Meta Ray-Bans. I don't know if you know about those, but they're like Facebook, the smart glasses, and it's just really convenient recording. And I actually wrote a script that would concatenate all the different recordings because they only let you record 60-second segments. So I had to automatically write a script to automatically concat them so that I could upload whole videos. But yeah, it's made it really easy to make your videos. So yeah,
That's
it's
pretty
been really
cool.
fun.
So you hacked into your glasses and now they record longer streams.
I didn't change the glasses, but basically, I guess, yeah.
That's pretty cool. So when you go out for a ride, do you go out for hours on end, or are these just quick trips?
Um, it just whatever trails are around. I choose the location based on what fits the route, like what's closer to other states, and sometimes it's a short ride, and other times it can be up to, like, I don't know, 10 miles, which is long for me, but probably not long for a lot of people.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a lot of fun. What's been your favorite state so far?
For mountain biking, maybe I don't know. I only see a little bit of all the states, and so far my favorite trails have been in Bentonville, Arkansas, and uh, South Carolina, the very north end of South Carolina. Um, but yeah, Bentonville is where Walmart is headquartered, and they developed a lot of trails there so they could attract employees, and they call
Right.
it the mountain bike capital of the world. But
Wow. Okay. I didn't know
yeah,
that. Knew it was founded there, but I didn't know that, or that's where their headquarters is. I didn't know that they had a mountain biking park there. That's pretty
yeah,
cool.
I had no idea too, and then I went there and I was like, wow, this place is great.
That kind of worked out for you.
Yep.
All right. So recently I read a book. My brother-in-law, he said you should check out this book. It was called Determined by Robert Sapolsky. And you and I were texting back and forth, and you had mentioned that you were reading Behave or rereading it by Robert Sapolsky. And I'm curious, I'm really interested to see how these two books or ideas, how close they are together. So maybe tell us a little bit about how you found the book and uh, tell us a little bit about it.
I don't remember how I first found out about it, but it was probably 10 years ago. No, I don't know. I think it may be more recent than that. I found out about Robert Sapolsky 10 years ago. I was trying to find individuals that knew a lot of stuff that I could just listen to for hours and hours on YouTube that had maybe public lectures or whatever. And he was one of them. Um, and so I've heard a lot about Behave, and I've heard him talk about it, but I hadn't read it until now. And
Okay.
honestly, it took me too long to read
Oh,
it
okay.
because
So you just read it then.
yeah,
Okay.
first time. Yeah. So yeah, it took me too long to get to it. I know that when he talks about it, he says a lot of things, and they're really cool. And I forget that there's a lot more in the book that authors will just not mention because they want you to read the book. They're not going to
Mhm.
say everything. Um, and So I got a lot from reading it, reading the full thing.
So what's the premise of the book Behave? What is it about?
I think he's trying to accelerate the process of humanity, of thinking rationally about human behavior instead of emotionally. So the way we think about misbehavior and criminals, he wants us to approach from a more rational perspective so that we're not vengefully punishing, but rather correcting behavior. And so that I feel like that's the motivation for why he wrote it. And it's split into two parts. The first part is talking about all the different influences on behavior, and the second part is talking about more influences of behavior, but um, it really culminates at the end when he makes a case for why the justice system should be radically reformed. And for example, there are 300 or 350 people who have been exonerated by DNA evidence that were never guilty, but were in prison for an average of 14 years, and including 20 people on death row who were saved because new evidence came out. So it's a big deal, and we need to be a lot more rational in the way we think about criminality. Yeah.
So one of the arguments, correct me if I'm mistaken, but he talks about, at least in Determined, when I read that, he talks about how our minds are programmed through experiences that we have through our life, and we almost don't make the next decision. It just comes naturally to us, where we're almost, I can't think of a better way to explain it, but one experience leads to the next, almost like we don't have will,
Hmm.
if that makes sense. I don't know if he puts forth kind of the same concept in Behave.
Yeah, I'm interested in reading Determined as well. In Behave, he he talks about free will at the end a bit, and he says that the more you learn about it, the more you see that whatever people think there is, like some observer that's actually controlling your decisions in the final analysis, that's like above biology, that there's less and less room for that thing to operate in.
Hmm.
And uh that's not the point of the book. I don't think it's heavily related. I don't I I'm not sure why he wrote Determined. I have to read it. But I think you could mostly understand his views about free will based on this book alone. So I guess he thought that it needed its own focus.
So, what were some of the key points of the book that stuck out to you that maybe you didn't pull from the interviews?
Um, I think he makes his main points pretty well in the interviews, but the book was just full of really interesting examples, things that I hadn't heard before, and some things that I had. But it was a book that at times it's a little boring reading or here, just I listened to it, but listening to these technical details that like the ones that I was familiar with, it was okay. But then stuff I wasn't familiar with, it was like, wow, this is really, really, really dry.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, but there are other parts of the book that like gave me chills, and other parts that just made me laugh for literally like minutes because of the absurdity of examples that he used. But yeah, he has a big sense of humor. That's another thing that I mean, you like even if you've read his books, you should also listen to his lectures and stuff because he is a super entertaining guy.
What were some of the examples he shares in the book, if you can share some?
Um, there were so many. Um, so some are shocking and others are yeah, hilarious. Uh, here's one that's kind of uh hilarious but also disturbing. Um, so there was a litter of so there's a mother pig and a litter of pigs that were put on trial in 1457, and the mother was uh to be executed, but the piglets were determined to be not old enough to understand the consequences of their actions.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Uh, the disturbing part is that they had eaten a child. Uh, yeah, really, really awful. So you understand why they'd be angry at the pigs, but it's just funny thinking about that they thought that the adult pig should be responsible for their own actions, and that it was an evil act that she
But
did. But
they held a trial.
yeah, they held a trial, and he said it was surprisingly modern the way that they uh, ran the trial. So yeah. Um, another example that he talks about. So yeah, with the two parts of the book, part one is all about the mechanisms of behavior, and he starts from like seconds in the past to minutes, hours, months, and he explains the mechanisms that operate on those timescales. And one that he gives for the most immediate, uh, like seconds in the past, is um, an example of a, a mass shooter. And the name rang a bell, but I didn't know who this guy was. Do you know who Charles Whitman was?
No, that sounds familiar. Uh, I'd have to look it up.
So he was a mass shooter.
Okay.
Um, and this was, I don't know, something like 40 years ago. But he killed his wife and mom, and then he went to the tower of University of Texas, I think Austin, maybe.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Yeah, this sounds familiar because this was like the first mass shooting in the United States, or one of the first more publicly known
Yeah.
shootings. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and he committed suicide, but he left a note, and in his note he said, "Please look inside my brain. Something is wrong with my brain." And they found a glioblastoma, so cancer, and it was pressing against his amygdala, which is a part of the brain that controls like fear and aggression.
Mhm.
And so he knew that something was wrong with his brain, and so that's the intuition that he had. And it's not 100% causal, but there are other factors. He was abused when he was younger. But uh, Robert Sapolsky mentioned that there like 2% or something of people on death row have had brain injuries in the past, and it kind of makes you wonder um, if that dramatically increased the risk factor for their behavior. Um, but yeah, so that's from the first chapter or maybe the second chapter, talking about seconds before and how the brain is processing information. And um, the the second part of the book is, I think, more about like social stuff. And one of the parts was talking about shame and how shame is used. And I just thought this example was hilarious. The UCLA football team, I don't know how long ago this was, maybe 10 years or something. But they somehow got handicap stickers so that they could park in handicap spaces.
Okay.
And they basically got like a slap on the wrist, but then there were this is perfect. They had a crowd of people, disabled people in wheelchairs, were like outside the courtroom or whatever, just waiting. And as they walked out, they all cheered for them.
Oh, wow.
So
Must
major public shaming,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
probably worse than the actual punishments.
for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, shame and it talks about like conformity and authority and just like everything. This book was crazy. This book talks about so many things. I feel like it should have probably been two separate books.
So what I'm getting from what you're sharing here is our behaviors aren't necessarily our own will driving decisions, but there are other factors that are kind of shaping our behaviors, whether it's like inside the brain, like the mass shooter that had a tumor, or um, maybe like an authority figure in your life that you're behaving a certain way because they expect you to behave that way. Is that kind of the argument that he's making?
It's not really the main point. The point that's probably the point of it determined, but this point was that behavior is complicated.
Yes.
And and so we should be more careful when assigning blame. So I
Okay.
could see how it's very similar to the idea that our actions, like we aren't responsible or whatever, free will. It could be very closely related to that, but that wasn't exactly the narrative. Like he didn't mention free will at all, pretty much until the very end when he talked about his final thoughts or something. So yeah, it's complicated, and that is something he repeats throughout the book. He says, and we see again that it's not just this that causes the behavior. It's this in this condition, this only because of this environmental thing. And yeah.
Okay. So how did that impact you reading that book in terms of when you are interacting with other people? Does it make you, do you feel less judgmental towards how people are behaving, or did it have an
Um, well, the book itself, it's still pretty recent for me, so we'll see if it changes. I don't really anticipate it changing much because I have heard a lot of these things before. Um, the first time I heard some of these things, for example, um, different brain structures related to propensity to develop addictions and um, become abusive or violent or vote a certain way. I heard about all these things and it made me, yeah, the initial reaction is yes, less judgment. And I think that has persisted. Less judgment, no, I wouldn't say judgment, less judgmental. I would say less angry
Mm,
because it's just people do have natures, and I don't know if I haven't read Determined yet, so I don't know what Robert Sapolsky exactly thinks about all of it. But towards the end of Behave, he does say that it is uh, less rational to be angry at somebody because of the way they behave. And but personally, for me, I guess I've thought about it for a long time, and I've kind of rejected that idea, kind of because as a software engineer, I write code and I get angry at the code. I know it's not doing it on purpose. I know it's something I wrote. I know it's not rational,
yeah.
but the emotion itself is natural as well. Just as, it's everyone has natures and anger is a natural emotion. And I get angry at inanimate objects because um, if I direct the anger, it produces results. So it releases energy and I can direct the anger. And one thing that I think Robert Sapolsky probably doesn't talk about is the effects of deterrence, punishment as deterrence.
Hmm.
So, yes, it may be irrational to punish somebody for something that um, they had no free will to exercise to do. But the fact that punishments exist also influences motivations. I don't know if he talks about that or addresses that in Determined, but those are my thoughts that kind of go beyond what he was saying in the book.
Yeah. I'm just imagining you right now staring at your computer screen, swearing at it, like, why aren't you working? Why isn't this doing what I want it to do?
That's pretty much what I do for
But what
work.
you need is more compassion towards the code, Mike. You just need to be more compassionate,
Yeah, maybe if I
a
have
little more
more
patient.
positive thoughts, it'll work.
Yeah, it is true though. I would say raising kids, they're all of my children are different and have different responses. Different things stimulate them. Different things make them angry. Um, and as a parent, you understand because you're with your kids all the time why they behave a certain way, why they act. And when you go out in public, in a restaurant, for example, and they're behaving that way, in my head, I'm like, oh yeah, they're going to respond this way. You can kind of see it coming, but those around you don't and have zero understanding. And so they kind of have maybe more of those negative responses. It is I think a compassionate way to view others with you don't know where they've been or what they've experienced or what kind of battles they're fighting and they're behaving in that certain way. So I think that's a good mindset.
Yeah. Yeah, it's important to be open-minded about everything and especially other people. Um, because yeah, man, there's so much good stuff in this book. Um, where somebody can suddenly shift from being a them to an us. He
Hmm.
talks about like
Us versus them.
the Christmas truce in World War One, where they all stopped fighting and just ate dinner together. And
Yeah. Yeah.
he has so many examples of things like that. Um, yeah, and so just keeping an open mind and realizing that you don't know everything about a person, uh, and always be open to learning more and being surprised. But by the same token, I also feel like it's okay for me to be the way I am. And sometimes that includes sharing an opinion. And, other people can react however they want to react. And then we can learn from each other.
Right. Yeah. I think that's a good way without ostracizing people for having a different opinion, right? People all come from different backgrounds and experiences. That's a good approach.
Yeah.
And learning, always learning. I love it. Well, is there anything else from the book that you wanted to share? Any other concepts or ideas that you felt like would be helpful?
Um, well, there was, there were a couple of things that were kind of mind blowing, that I wish more people knew about, just because they're so cool. Have you heard of the DRD4 dopamine receptor?
No.
So this is a receptor that's produced by a gene, that DRD4. It's called the 7R, 7 repeater gene, and this it will the people who have it in certain environments, they well, it makes people more novelty seeking. And so that has a lot of consequences, and it depends on the environment again, like the same theme throughout the book. Like it all depends. Multiple things are causing behavior, but um, people who have this variant, they are twice as likely to cheat on their spouse. They are more prone to addiction, I think, and they just in general exhibit more exploratory behavior. And I don't remember. I think they also might be a little more intelligent, but I can't remember exactly about that one. Um, but there was a study where somebody analyzed how often this occurred in different populations, and they looked at all the different native populations in the world, and in East Asia, this variant of the gene occurs less than 1% in the
Oh, really?
population. It's
Wow.
like almost non-existent. And Robert Sapolsky talks about the uh let's see, not collectivism. I don't think that's the word he used, but basically there's evidence that rice farming increases the need to stay in one place and invest in a community, and,
Uh-huh. Okay.
and coordinate.
Which
And
which
so
is very anti-novelty. Like your
exactly.
function is to make sure that the rice paddies grow, that everything's level, that the water flows through at a certain pace. That's
Exactly.
okay.
But but then there was like the the land bridge in North America. He looked at different Native American populations, and uh, so in 23% of Europeans and Americans, you find this variant of the gene, 7R. And in people who started island hopping along Malaysia and New Guinea, there's a bit higher incidence of this of 7R. And then people who not migrated to America across the Bering Land Bridge, um, it's higher. Among Maya, it's up to 40%, and among tribes in the northern part of South America, it's around 55%. And
Whoa.
then among people who made it all the way to the Brazilian basin or the Amazon basin, it was 70%.
Wow. So
Isn't
the
that crazy?
explorers, yeah, that is
Yeah.
crazy. So
Yeah.
the people that got out, the 1%, let's say, that want to go explore, they go breed and have children, and the gene continues on to. That is really fascinating. So
Yeah.
now I want to go to get tested for it if there's a
Yeah,
way.
me too.
Well,
Yeah.
it's evident in you because you're traveling across all 50 states. I'm probably the 1% that doesn't, or the 99% that doesn't. That is really
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah, and I like that example because it's such a neat it's like visual too. Like it shows just a map of how genes and behavior go together.
Uh-huh.
But here's a quote he said about that that kind of encapsulates the whole message of the book. Suppose that every study shows with whopping clarity and consistency that the DRD4 variant is highly predictive of novelty seeking. That still doesn't tell us why, for some people, novelty seeking means frequently switching their openings and chess games, while for others it means looking for a new locale because it's getting stale being a mercenary in the Congo.
Hmm. That's so good. That is really interesting.
Yeah.
So just in your genes, there's things that you're hardwired and programmed to seek out.
Yeah, it's there are a lot of factors involved.
Yeah. That's just
But yeah,
yeah,
but
that's
there are definite effects. Yeah.
yeah. And you kind of need both in a society. You need people that are stable, farming consistently, but you need people exploring too, inventing and making life better. That's
Yeah.
a good example.
Yep.
Well, that's awesome. So, how would you rate the book? Single, double, triple? We always ask people, in terms of from your perspective, reading it, would you say it's a home run, grand slam, strikeout?
Um, I'm gonna say it's a triple, but it's kind of if you're interested at all in it, it's a must read because there's so much good information in it. The reason it's not a home run to me is because it is long and even though it's full of really great stuff, um, I think it should have been two books.
Okay.
And and there's also one area that I think he may not have um mentioned all the important facts about, uh, but so the amygdala, but it's not super important. But I could also kind of see that his political bias may have been influencing him to leave out a little bit of the uh, positive things that come with having a larger amygdala volume. But anyway, it's just I've been interested in this stuff for a long time, so I really should have read this book a long time ago.
Super fascinating. Well, I think you'll like Determined if you pick it up. It carries a lot of that, a lot of those similar principles, but there are things that you shared today that weren't in Determined. Well, that's awesome. Well, where can people find you and follow your adventures as you crisscross the United States?
Um, well, so for yeah, for that the mountain biking videos and random stuff, I have a YouTube channel and I'm trying to remember my handle. I think it's M3PO22.
Okay. All
So
right.
good luck remembering me that. I have a hard time. Um, but yeah, if you're interested in any at all in engineering or anything, else, like MF pairs is my Twitter handle. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, Mike, thanks for coming on today and pitching Behave by Robert Sapolsky. I think I'll pick it up. I'm going backwards. I started with Determined, but now I think I'll go read Behave. And for those that are listening, please like, subscribe the podcast and share with your friends. And again, Mike, thanks for coming on. It's been great having you today.
Yeah, thanks for